All right, welcome back to episode number 2 of the Taco Time podcast. I am here today with Nathon Crawford. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Yep. Good afternoon, everybody. Glad to be here. I'm Nathon Crawford, member of the competitive team, the Card Guyz, and super excited to talk about some meta.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So my name's Anthony Zicella. You might know me as Del Taco and on Discord of the Taco. I wanted to get together with you and thank you for being here to talk about the meta. We had 2 big tournaments this last weekend and we got to see kind of a diverse spread of heroes. And running into Pro Tour, I wanted to see what your thoughts were about what's viable, what's not, what's converting, what isn't, speculation, and the truth. Let's get into it. So I want to go over 2 events. We had 2 big events this weekend. The first one we had was on the West Coast. We had the AGE Open, which was just slightly smaller than the Battle Hardened. I think we had 45 people. I could be wrong, but pretty close. And then on the East Coast, we had Richmond. So you didn't go to Richmond, right?
I did not.
Okay. So Richmond, I'm looking at the top 8 right now, and we have Matt on Lexi. We got Pat on Oldhim. We have Jody on Dromai, and I think that was Big Dragon Dromai. Trent on Oldhim. We have Dash. That's Merrick. Bravo. We had Devin on Azuri, and Brody Spurlock once again on Azalea. So did that play out the way you thought it would? It seems pretty diverse.
The last big tournament, what was it? The Chicago Brawl tournament was really diverse as well. I think it was like the exact same situation. The only copy in Richmond was Oldhim, whereas the Chicago one, I think there was only 2 Azalea. Everything else was different. So very similar. Just the makeup is a little different. Of course, Brody being in there, I think that has more to do with it being Brody and less to do with it being Azalea.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that Azalea is bad, but
yeah, I think yesterday we were talking and I was like, Brody Spurlock could top 8 a Battle Hardened with a kitchen sink and a ham sandwich, and it'd be fine, you know.
Right, absolutely. Pat is also a great player, the one who actually took it down.
Okay,
he's been a long time Guardian player. We've played at 2 different callings before. A great player, and I think he is reaping the rewards of being a Guardian specialist.
sure.
He's been loyal to that class for so long, and it's kind of Guardians had a lot of time in the limelight, but now is no different than those, and I think it's a good spot to be a Guardian player right now.
Yeah, I agree. I was actually a little bit surprised. Not surprised at all, actually, to see Oldhim and Oldhim in the finals. Like, not even a little bit surprised.
Right.
But I was a little bit surprised to see only one Bravo, because I think that Bravo might be a bit of a sleeper in this meta. He kind of does what Oldhim does, but he can also just smash her face in the meantime, you know? And
Right.
Bravo doesn't struggle really into Dromai. And that's not to say that Oldhim does struggle into Dromai, but Oldhim doesn't ever beat Dromai unless the Dromai is a bad player. It doesn't lose to it, but it doesn't really beat it. I see that match go to time most of the time, you know?
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. So are you shocked at all that it was double Oldhim? Was that what you were thinking would happen? Because that's kind of what I was thinking would happen, you know?
Yeah. That's basically what I was gonna guess was gonna happen. I was expecting a little bit more dash, to be honest, because I think the general consensus of the community about a week or so ago, maybe 2 weeks, is that Oldham's probably the best deck. Just has the biggest toolkit, can answer the most questions. So I was kind of baffled that there were more people just gunning for the Rangers and playing those decks instead of trying to answer Oldham. I thought that was a little bit odd, but maybe there just wasn't enough time.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. We were talking a little bit earlier today, I think, or yesterday, about Dash being kind of underrepresented, especially with a bunch of Oldhim in the field. Just because she does the Exodia package so well. She's such a versatile deck. And I talked to my friend Andrea, who's Capolo online, and he top 8 at the other event with Dash. And I asked him, what do you think about maybe bringing Dash to Pro Tour? And he said, you farm Oldhim all day, but the Ranger match is just pretty miserable.
it's really rough. That's probably the one thing holding her back. But there's also the counterplay that maybe after Richmond, the Rangers get a little discouraged
Sure.
and they go to other decks, and maybe that's Dash's like window of opportunity as more people like try to either play Oldhim or play things that beat Oldhim, which is basically anything but Ranger.
Hmm.
And maybe that's Dash's opportunity. But I 100% agree. Rangers are atrocious to Dash.
Sure. Yeah.
Unless they're Tree Frog. Maybe that's the answer.
That is
If you go
true.
Tree Frog, then it's better.
I'm for anybody who knows me, I'm like a diehard Ninja main. Do you have? I don't really have any experience playing into Tree Frog in anything other than Fi, because I've been on Fi since Nationals pretty consistently. I'll dabble in other decks for fun, but like when I go to a big tournament, I'm usually on Fi because that's what I have the most reps in, and I feel like my matchup knowledge is really strong. Is it true of any aggro deck that like Tree Frog just can't really hold the line, or is it pretty versatile into anything other than I can go 5 or 6 wide every turn?
Tree Frog Dash is going to do great into anything that has minimal explosive potential. That's what it boils down to, because Tree Frog Dash is trying to operate on like just raw efficiency, but raw efficiency goes out of the window when you play, a Channel Mount Heroic and then go 7/7/7/7.
Of course, yeah.
And you're not doing anything to prevent me from setting that up. So, that's kind of where it loses. So really the big contenders against Tree Frog Dash are only Briar, Fi, and maybe Katsu.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? And that one less so because like you basically turn off his ability because you're blocking everything.
Yeah.
So it's a little more inconsistent, but mainly Fi and Briar. And out of Richmond, I mean, that made up what, 6% of the meta?
It was nothing,
like
yeah.
literally nothing, right?
Yeah, I remember the first time I played a Tree Frog Dash, I was like, oh, he's probably going aggro, and I expected the guy to flip a pounder, and then he didn't, and then I was like, oh, he's going defensive, and that was the first time I ever saw Tree Frog, and I was like, what the hell is this deck doing? And yeah, I mean, the deck is annoying for sure, but I mean, for somebody like you or me who are kind of aggro at heart, Runeblade ninja players, like you just kind of like wait till they get to under 20, and then their deck starts to kind of fall apart after they run out of D-reacts, and then it's kind of smooth sailing from there. Yeah. And then so I'm looking also at Azuri. We have Azuri 1. That I think is probably so I've heard down the grapevine, and I don't know how true this is because we don't have deck lists yet, but I heard that was actually the more contract heavy Azuri build. I don't know if you have any information on that, but I think regardless, Azuri's kind of trying to do the same thing, whether she's the Cheerios version or the contract version. What do you think about Azuri in this meta? Do you think it has legs? Do you think it's a real deck? Is it something that people don't know how to play against?
I think the Oldhim matchup is not as favored as the Azuri's thought. The Oldhim players have adapted and basically they just run Sledge.
Yeah.
And they just block 2 cards, Sledge, block 2 cards, Sledge. And the way the card economy works, you're utilizing 3 cards, they're only utilizing 1 out of their deck.
Sure.
And so and then that's not even count Earth React. So basically that matchup isn't as good as they thought. But basically I think Azuri comes down to, do you think there will be more Rangers than Dromai?
Sure.
If there is, then it makes sense because it's really good into Ranger, but it's so bad into Dromai.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah. Yeah, I was playing against my friend Ryan, who's on the podcast. He picked up the Azuri deck right after Dando killed it at the 5K brawl, and I did not know what to do. I was totally baffled, and we had a big case tournament here. He was my 1 loss in Swiss, and then I got lucky enough to get paired into him in top 8 first round, and we both got IP3s, which was pretty hilarious.
Nice.
Yeah, and I was like, the only experience I had with that deck was watching Papaya play it. And when Levi played against Sam, he was throwing D-reacts out of his arsenal in response to the Uzi activation. And I was like, okay, maybe that's what I do. And since then, yeah, and he ran me over again. He did this turn where he like played Leave No Witness and then closed the combat chain and then played Codex and then he played a Leave No Witness again and he blew up my arsenal. And it was just the amount of value was crazy. But in the week or two since then, I kind of learned that, and I was kind of yelling a little bit about how difficult that matchup was when you did the live stream
Mm-hmm.
to see if Oldham was the best deck. And I was like, oh man, it's really hard for fight. It's really hard. And then I stopped blocking. Like I just stopped blocking. Yeah. I was like, okay. So I took out all the D-Reacts and I just made it straight combo, like 59 cards in a flame. And it's, they can get you pretty close to dead, but the moment that they have 2 cards in hand, you throw an Art of War or something big in the arsenal and you just blow them out. So it's actually, it's not that hard. I think you were dead on with that. I just didn't know how to play the matchup. So again, with Fi not being really a contender from what we've seen, into everything else, you think Azuri has legs except into Oldham, basically. Is that what your thoughts are on that?
Oldham and Dromai.
Okay.
Those are the two, which unfortunately is a very large percentage of the meta.
100%.
Going to the Pro Tour, that's probably, you're talking at least 35%, if not more.
Sure. So maybe if the Gem Gods bless Azuri players, they'll be all right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then obviously the elephant in the room is Azalea. We got 1 conversion. We're talking about Brody doing that. What happened? What happened, do you think? Because it did represent a decent chunk of the Battle Hardened, and nobody really converted. And I don't know if that's because the Guardian players that were there kind of just knew what to do, or maybe also it could totally be that the Azalea players there hadn't had enough reps on the deck and just didn't really know how to play it yet.
I think it comes down to, I mean, Azalea has a very simple question that everybody knows, and it's easy to answer, right? Big D reacts, reinforce the line, Oasis Respite, Peace of Mind, things like that. So I think Azalea got a lot of surprise factor in Chicago, but people started, doing what they do. After Kano has a big event, what does everybody do? Everybody immediately puts AB3.
Yep.
And it's the exact same effect, right? So everybody knew Azalea was on the map, so everybody was throwing in Oasis, reinforce the line, stuff like that, more D reacts, and it's a very simple question to answer with deck building.
Sure. Yeah, I was talking to George Roger, who's like the UK Fi god, and I don't know if he wants me to spoil his secret tech, but spoiler alert, it's just 60 reacts. And he's like, there you go. After I did that, it was fine. And I had a difference of opinion, and it's been working okay as long as I don't just get Red in the Ledger dominate for a 12 turn 1. And my secret tech is just Fog Down. So like I'll just block, drop Fog Down, Arsenal Art of War, and then blow them out the next turn,
Yep.
And as long as I can get that on the board before I go to, say, below 20, like it's probably a decent race, because they have to start blocking, otherwise I'm just going to send 35 damage at their face, and they give you a lot of time to set up. So you just throw that first Salt the Wound in the Arsenal or the Art of War, and then you just kind of go. Now that's not to say that it's an easy matchup, and you and I actually ran into each other earlier today on Talishar, and I attempted to play Azalea for the first time ever. And the first game, I didn't know what I was doing. You were nice enough to humor me with the second game.
Sure.
And that game, like, sure. I got you to like 5. Like, and
yeah,
I can see aggro being, if you play against somebody who knows what they're doing, I can see aggro really struggling to that. So I think what we're seeing with the new meta being kind of aggro light, she seems like a really good answer to a heavy aggro meta, but I don't think we're in that anymore.
Right, exactly. That's exactly what I would say is, she's a great deck and she targets something great, but she targets something that's currently not in existence. I mean, like 5, Briar, Katsu, all comprised maybe together 10% of the meta. So, like, why would you bring a deck that wants to be amazing into 10% of the meta and then just fold to Dromai and Oldham and even Bravo? I mean, those matches before, I'm in the ballpark that Oldham is probably 80% into Azalea. I think it's that easy.
Sure.
The Oldham player just has to play the matchup, know what to do, what not to do. Not go in with the mindset of fatigue, but pick spots to be disruptive.
Yeah.
And the match will end in fatigue.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I stand.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about that the other day. I think the only thing that Oldham is really worried about coming from Azalea is the dominate. Like, I don't think he really cares about what anything else does. He doesn't care about Red in the Ledger because he just wants to throw a Thunderquake at you. or
Exactly.
or Glacial Footsteps, and he doesn't care about Remorseless because he's just going to take 1 damage when he throws the big 10 at you, you know? So
Yep.
as long as he can survive the big dominate turns until they run out of those pump spells, then he's kind of got the game locked. And I'm pretty sure Azalea has a pretty terrible time into Dromai. So maybe we see that just deck kind of it falls off, except for the few people that are just way too dedicated and bought all the cards and have their $900 worth of codexes and ready to go. You
Sure.
know. And then the last mentions from the Battle Hardened were the one Dromai. Dromai was, I think, the most represented deck. I think there was 15 of them. So I think it was a third of the field at least. Dromai is a deck that can be played different ways. The one that converted, I'm pretty sure, was Big Dragon Dromai, which is the Dark Odious, Jamie Faulkner School of Thought.
Mhm.
I know Mara almost top 8'd. She went 5-2, 5-2-1, something like that. Is the issue of Dromai not converting to top 8 a skill issue because it's actually a really difficult deck to play properly? Or do you think that the field just doesn't really favor it?
For this tournament specifically, I think it's the cycle of adjustments. And what do I mean by that? I mean basically when the Rangers came out, right? Dromai had an immediate shift to Big Dragon,
Mhm.
right? Because it doesn't really make sense to be throwing Flame Call awakenings when you're being read in the ledger.
Sure.
Like it's counterproductive. So I think they had a huge shift into Big Dragon, and they found some success from the other decks because they had just changed their archetype, right?
Sure.
Well, this tournament, everybody knew Dromai was going to be on Big Dragon. So they had the opportunity, everybody in their deck building had the opportunity to adjust accordingly.
Mhm.
And then now it's interesting to see how the Dromai players can adjust because
Mhm.
they can't just go into Pro Tour with a normal Big Dragon Dromai list, and they need a little something to just take them over the edge and gain an advantage. Any type of element of surprise from Dromai
Mhm.
is what it'll take to take down the event.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much. I have a really good friend. His name's Zachary Wallach, and he got like 15th at Worlds with Dromai. He's an amazing Dromai player. I always make the joke that he's my final boss at locals. My Pro Quest win this year was against him in the finals, and I was so happy to see him.
There you go.
And he sat down and he's like, "Do you want to split?" And I was like, "No,
No,
I'll
no.
I'll take my chances with Fi against you, buddy." And
Yep.
you know that usually that's a blowout. I've played matches and callings and stuff where I'm on Fi and I go into Dromai and they end the game at 34. He got me to like 7 because he's just a really good Dromai player, you know.
Right.
And the other experience that I've had is against Mara's deck or Isaac's deck from Attack Action Podcast. They're very similar, kind of go fast, lots of 0 for 4 go again shenanigans. I played Mara's Dromai deck at the last Age Open on the West Coast, and that deck destroys Big Dragon Dromai. It is
Mhm.
it's like playing Fi with permanence, right? So
Yep. Exactly.
it's really strong, and it's actually pretty decent into aggro too. Like I was able to take out a couple Briars that day too because they have you think of it like this: every dragon that you drop on the table, you gain 3 life, right? So
Mhm.
because it takes away from their tempo. So that deck is really good into an aggro field as well. It's really good into a Dromai heavy field, but it absolutely folds to Guardian like it just does, unfortunately.
Right. Right.
So do you think we'll see as much Dromai at Pro Tour? Or do you think it'll still be the crazy choice?
I think we'll see even more.
Okay.
But I think uh, if I was playing Dromai, I couldn't justify the decision to play the more aggressive one.
Sure.
Unless there was some secret tech that nobody knows about.
Hmm.
But Big Dragon, I think somebody will innovate just a little bit, and it'll be enough to take them a really long way.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah, 100%. And then the last one is Maddie McGinnis on Lexi. So Lexi's a deck. She's fast. She has ice. She's versatile. I think I played him on Talishar a week ago. I think he is on like ice light Lexi. I don't think it's full fuseless, and I don't think it's full ice vein incarceration jams.
Right.
Lexi was super well represented in both tournaments. What do you think about Lexi? I mean, he went first place after Swiss, and then I think he lost in round one of the top. Is it a deck that we're going to see top 8? Is it one of those things where if the gem gods align and everything's great, it's amazing, but it just folds to some things? What do you think about Lexi?
I definitely think that Lexi is the best ranger. With that being said, just like you mentioned, she could be built the more ice direction or the more fuseless direction, and it's very strange as a the inside the mindset of the Lexi player and how they want to attack the meta, because we know there's a lot of guardian, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to, that pulls you more fuseless. Well, the only way to gain an edge in the mirror or against azaleas or any other aggro is to run more ice.
Sure.
So that pulls you the other way, right? And then Dromai, Dromai is probably relatively similar for both versions. It
Mm-hmm.
probably doesn't impact it too much. But really, it just depends on, do you think, if they think they'll be more aggro, which I highly doubt, they'll go more ice. And then if they think they'll be more guardians, then they'll go more fuses.
Sure, that makes sense. Chris Ioli, the guy that got second at Worlds, is a local to me. He, I don't know how true this is, but I feel like I didn't start seeing a ton of Lexi until he got second place at the Age Open last time. He came in with a deck that was pretty gross. It was a little more ice heavy. It had amulets before they were banned. And then the next time we saw him play it, he played a totally fuseless version, and it was really solid. I know that he runs red incarcerations and polar blasts, and I think they're in his sideboard for the aggro package. So that deck can actually just put out a ton of damage. And now with codexes and stuff, it might just be, I don't know. I guess it depends on the build, but I think that deck definitely has legs, and I think we'll be seeing a decent amount of it. And I agree with you. I think it is the better ranger by a lot.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it was funny going into this ProQuest season because you always kind of plan your deck or your build around the assumption that Lexi is not a real deck, right? Up until recently, I think. And
right.
Yeah, and like the whole time I've been playing Flesh and Blood, Lexi was kind of like, you don't really want to see it, but also like you're probably not going to see it, so don't worry about it too much. And there's a guy, Evan Bridges, and he is a local, and he won 2 ProQuests with it. And he's like, just plays Lexi only, even in Blitz, like that's his thing. And he just like the stars aligned and his time came and he was just destroying everybody. So yeah, so you think we'll see some at the Pro Tour? You think it'll do well though?
I think we'll see a lot. I'm not sure if everybody is aware of the tech, but I think the Lexi players are going to have to overcome the card Humble.
Sure.
That's the 2 for 6 that is basically a sleep dart, turns off the hero box.
Sure.
And why that impacts Lexi so much is it takes away her ability to flip, which means if you load an arrow, which the fuseless is 90% arrows, then your turn's dead because you can't give any arrow go again because you don't have a second arsenal slot.
That makes sense.
So that's a really good piece of tech against Lexi, and if the Lexi players don't have an answer for that, it could prove to be very challenging.
And that's great too, because like everybody plays CNC in the sideboard, not just for Lexi, but like it's for Lexi, right?
Right.
And like CNC is almost always never going to hit Lexi, but that's kind of the point. You want to steal 2 cards from them because the Lexi is kind of a clunky aggro deck. She needs a lot to set up every turn. And so even if Humble comes in for 6, it's the same as CNC. It might not turn off the text box, but it might just disrupt them enough that it kind of screws up their turn. So yeah,
exactly.
So I want to kind of cruise over and look at the age top 8. We had one Lexi there, also in first seed going into top 8. That's Bryce. He's been on Lexi for a long time. His deck is much more ice heavy. So I've known Bryce for a long time. He plays like 9 Chilling Ice Veins. He'll Blizzard you. He'll play Channeling Frigid against you and incarcerate you every turn if he can.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a very heavy ice deck, but he plays it well. So it doesn't surprise me that he came in for seed. And then second place, going into top 8 was Zach Wallach, the guy I was just talking about on Dromai. Going into third, we have Alex Cuevas, who's a relatively new Fab player actually, who's kind of killing it out here. He started maybe 3 months ago. He works at a shop that we have weekly armories at, and we've been harassing him to play Fab forever. And then he ended up just picking up one deck. He like built one deck, and then he was hooked, and now he has like 17 decks in his box, and they're all blinged out, and his trade binder looks insane. Yeah. So, but he came in third place on Azalea. Fourth place was Arya Howe on Dory. Arya's been on Dory since she top aided the Battle Hardened that happened in Texas maybe 6 months ago that
Nice.
Peter Budensic won with Combo Fi. Um,
Right.
and then fifth place is everybody's favorite troll in Southern California, Alan Chavarin. Alan is kind of famous for being the second or third best Bolton player in the world. So obviously your teammate is probably the best Bolton player. My
Josh,
friend,
yeah.
yeah, my friend Jimmy Lee is probably right next to him, if not just slightly below as far as finishes go. And then Alan is like this kid from San Diego that just always, nobody knows who he is, but he always top eights with Bolton. Even in metas where Bolton doesn't work, he's just a monster on that deck. And during ProQuest season, he like just got tired. He won a ProQuest with Icelander, and then he just like wanted to have fun. So he started playing Brutes, and this guy started playing Rhinar, and then he's playing Levia now just because he thinks it's funny. So he came in fifth place because he just rolls scab skins like a madman, like you should, and plays a bunch of disruption. And he showed up to Age with a paper playmat from the Learn to Play kit.
Hell
And
yeah.
and a torn in half Levia with a cold foil claw that didn't have a sleeve on it. So props to him. And I asked him, I was like, "What are you playing at the Pro Tour?" Man, he's like, "Oh, I'm running this, baby." Like, good dude. So Alan came
for him.
Yeah, me too. I love watching him play. He's a super passionate player, and he's a really funny guy. He actually brought me my fog downs for my Azalea tech, and I was like, "How much do I owe you?" And he's like, "Let me look it up." And he sent me a Venmo request for $1, so I thought that was pretty funny. And then after that, we got John Zapata, who is a good friend of mine as well, who's a monster. He top eights every Battle Hardened, and nobody knows who he is. He's on Azalea as well. And then we have Andrew Rudin, who is a diehard Prism player. I've purposely caused fights with him and Fino on Twitter just to watch them argue. And he came in seventh on Dromai, and then number 8 was Andrea Capolo, and he was on Dash. So this is kind of a similar vibe, right? We have some Lexi, we have some Azalea, we have some Dromai, which makes sense. The 3 outliers that I want to talk about is we have Capolo on Dash. We were talking about Dash a little bit ago. He is a really talented Dash player. Like that's kind of like his whole thing. He also has a podcast, and his whole background is Dash stuff, and he's the Dash guy. So it doesn't surprise me that he probably won a bunch of his matches, even if they were bad matchups, just because he knows the deck so well,
Exactly.
It's a skill issue thing. Alan on Brute. What do you think about Brute? Do you think Brute's viable? Like, maybe you just in this meta? I don't know.
I mean, I think it was less so the Brute and more the fact that he was playing with cold foil claws with no sleeves.
That might be the move.
I think that's worth an extra damage.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Unfortunately, Brute's just not in a good place.
Sure.
You have decks that don't care about it being intimidated because they're so aggro, like the Rangers, and then you have decks that, I think I saw his list, and I think he's running like 8 pummels. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of cool, but like, if you are gonna be like pummeling everybody, there's probably like better ways to do it.
Sure.
Like Guardian,
yeah, 100%.
But like, I mean, if people enjoy what they like to play, go for it. But for as far as competitive goes, I think you could utilize that same strategy in other decks and probably just yield better results. So it's not that it's bad. It's just there's other heroes that do something similar better.
Sure. So I have a couple friends that are kind of like Rhinar mains, right? And they hop around because they know that Rhinar's not winning anything, so they'll play other decks in the meantime. But the thing that I hear from every Rhinar player is as soon as Oldhim is the best deck in the meta, they're like, "Oh, this is my time, baby. This is Rhinar's time." And I don't know if that's just mad cope or not, because I've never seen. I mean, I think at Canadian Nationals we saw one Rhinar kind of sneak into top 8, and we saw one in Malaysia. I think she won the Nationals there. It was a girl. Does Rhinar have legs into Oldhim, or is that just like something that the Brute players tell themselves to feel better about themselves?
I don't know, because if you look at it theoretically, you could set up like a double Blood Rush Bellow and like quad intimidate and like just go in, right?
Mhm,
Theoretically.
mhm.
But like while you're setting that up, I mean, they're not just like they're not sun tanning, right? They're
Yeah,
gonna be like they're gonna be throwing spinals and cripplings if it's Bravo, like they're gonna be applying pressure because their crappy blues still deal 8 damage.
sure.
Like there's always something that they could be doing if you're like meticulously pitch stacking, three red barragings next to each other. Like
Mhm.
they're gonna be applying pressure. So I think in it the Reinhardt deck doesn't have the toolkit to like survive while pressuring.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, yeah.
So I think that's the biggest problem.
I think some of that kind of ideology comes from Blitz Reinar, because for
Absolutely.
a long time it was just like Oldhim or Viserai, and then Viserai was gone, and it was just Oldhim. And the thing I always kept hearing is like, Oldhim can't kill me Oldhim can't win if he can't block. Right, essentially was the move. But
Right.
when you have 20 life, it's a lot different than when you have 40. Right.
Right.
Um, so, and then the other thing I think about with that is Chandler Toe, who won the World's Calling with Reinar, and I don't I don't know if that's just a Chandler Toe thing. You know what I mean? That was a pretty heavy Oldham field, um, but it's like I don't
I think I think he was picking on the Icelanders,
I think he might have
right?
been. Yeah, I think he might have
Yeah.
been. Because he said like I think he said basically like if I ran into anything aggro, I just lose. I think he said that
Right.
on
Right.
somebody else's podcast, but so maybe he just got blessed with the gem gods. Also, Philip Vu, who's a local guy that's kind of a monster here, who we lost. We lost our dear friend to the One Piece trading card game. He's a monster in trading in One Piece now, but he won a Pro Quest this year with Reinar as well. He loves Reinar. He day 2'd the calling in Worlds with Reinar. I think maybe if you get a really talented Reinar that can outplay you, you probably just lose. But as a whole, at the Pro Tour, when it's the best of the best, I think I agree. I don't know if it's got what it takes to get there, you know?
Right.
And then the last one I wanted to talk about was Arya, because Arya ended up winning the Age Open on Dorinthia. We were talking the other day about whether Dory has legs, and it seems like the general consensus is she doesn't. Um, I don't know enough about Dory. Can you tell me why you think she can't get there? Is it the Dromai matchup?
Well, I could tell you that I probably have the best, not only the best Bolton, but the best Dorinthia player on the team as
Sure.
well. Same person, Josh, of course. And I could tell you right now, he's not feeling good about it.
Mhm.
You know, am I saying that he's not playing it? Absolutely not, because we know how dedicated some specialists can be.
Sure.
Um, but he is really at the drawing board on how to gain any type of advantage in this current meta situation. So um, typically, if the person that is typically the trailblazer for a specific hero is kind of like really reaching to make the class work, that is typically indicative of
It's a bad
it
sign.
not being in a good yeah,
Yeah, it's a
it's
bad
not a
sign.
good spot.
Sure, sure. Yeah, I don't know what her matchups were that day. Ari's matchups that day. I have to imagine she ran into a bunch of people that I guess don't. I think that's the thing with Dory, not so much Bolton. I think the thing with Dory is that like nobody really knows. I mean, there are people, don't get me wrong, that know how to play against Dory, but if you don't know how to block against Dorinthia, I think you just get blown out, right?
Absolutely.
That's the scary thing. Um, and even me as somebody that's, you know, a grinder, I go to all the big events and I try to qualify for everything that I can. I still kind of don't really understand how to block against Dory. Like if she has 2 cards in hand, like I can guess it's +3 or
Mhm.
+4. If she has 4 cards in hand, like who knows, man. Um, so is would you say that most people that we're going to see at the Pro Tour know how to play against Dory?
I would say that some of them will,
Okay.
but as far as I the problem, like Azalea coming into the format
Hmm.
is going to increase the amount of D reacts, which
Hmm.
we know is not what Dory wants.
Sure.
So there's kind of like she's kind of like how Lexi always keeps getting punished by the ice bands. Dorinthia is kind of in the same spot where other heroes are just influencing decisions that go against her, basically.
That makes sense. Yeah, I know. I tried for so long to figure out the Dory matchup when I was playing Briar and when I was playing Fi, and I finally settled on this is my game plan against Dorinthia players. I just pretend like they're not there, and if their life is at 0 before mine is, we did a good job, right? Like,
there you go.
I just tried to pop off way harder and make them block first, and if that works, awesome. But like trying to figure out the whole D react thing has been pretty tiresome for me. But I can see having 6D reacts, like it's possible that the decks that have those already in them, and then now the ones that are adding them, it's going to be hard for Dory to kind of get through whatever 17 rounds, 16 rounds, to make it to the finals.
Right.
So yeah, so I guess that's kind of our top 8 for both of them. Do you think that there's any kind of sleepers, dark horses, anything that we're not considering or not seeing that might pop up, or do you think this is kind of the spread?
I think Tree Frog Dash is going to be the one that really surprises a lot of people that we haven't seen a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
I'm expecting that to really do well in the Pro Tour,
Mm-hmm.
just because this is something I learned being a chain player for a while was, when you play chain, you play a match against a guardian, right? You don't know whether they're just going to try and bite you or fatigue you,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And like if you guess right, like then you get to play a fair game. But if you guess wrong, then you're just at an extreme disadvantage from the beginning. So it just Tree Frog Dash is on the other side of that equation where there's a lot of surprise factor.
Sure.
And so I think there's a lot to be gained there. And then, like I said, if the Dromize can have a little bit of innovation, I think it'll take them a long way.
Just a little spice to get them through it. Yeah,
Something.
that's I mean, I'm not going to ask you what you're playing because that's top secret information, but are you
Well, I don't know yet.
Yeah, same. I've been kind of I went into Age playing Fi because it's built and it's something I know really well, but I also brought 2 other decks and I looked around the room and I was like, okay, there's a bunch of Dromai here. I know that there was a bunch of Dromai at the Battle Hardened, and I was like, okay, so if I play Fi and everybody expects her to be no Fi, and I run into a bunch of Dromai, like maybe I just farm my way to top 8, and that's not what happened at all. But
Right.
in your stream the other day when you were talking about is Oldhim really the best deck by the percentages? When we did that big chart and everybody was kind of chiming in, Fi still ended up like 3rd place. So do you think he still has a place in the meta, or do you think he's got to take a break for a while?
I think that, I mean, like the math says yes, but the problem is it's kind of like it's the Guardian dilemma back when Prism existed.
Sure.
Right? Like, if you bring Fi, you have an amazing matchup into Dromai.
Mm-hmm.
You have a solid matchup into the Guardians. I would argue favorable into both of them.
Sure.
But you run into a Ranger and it's just so tough when half of your deck is built by 3 go again 2 blocks, right?
Yep.
I mean, you do have Flame Scale Furnace going for you, but like that's going to get drill shot in the first 2-3 turns.
Of course, yeah.
It gets miserable so quick.
In my testing against Lexi lately, the deal feels like this. It feels like if I can go second against Lexi and they're not playing ice, it's not that bad. But if they have any ice cards in their sideboard and they draw an Incarceration and just time walk me, it's good game, right?
Yep. That's it.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. And then I wanted to talk about your pet deck. I'm not sure if you're going to play Briar, but everybody knows that you play Briar.
Yep.
Do you think Briar has legs? Do you think she's still got it? I mean, she can just drop CMH and kind of blow anybody out. And I was talking to a friend of mine, Adam Feifels, and I asked him, he can't go because he has a family thing, I think, to the Pro Tour. And I said, hey man, if you were gonna, he's been on Azalea the last couple of weeks, and I think he's just playing it because it's fun. And I was like, hey man, if you were gonna go to Pro Tour, would you bring Azalea? And he's like, nah. And I was like, what would you take? And he told me I would take Briar. And I was like, why? And he said, because CMH exists. Do you think that Briar can get there?
Well, I do have 3 decks that are on the top of my list right now, and that's Bravo, Tree Frog Dash, and Briar.
Okay.
Are the 3 decks that I'm currently not. I'm not saying that I'll for sure lock in one of those. I'm
Sure.
just saying currently in testing, that's where my top 3 are.
Mhm.
And the problem with CMH, it's an amazing card, but the power is telegraphed, right? So I play it, and typically you get most of your actual value on the preceding turn.
Mhm.
And so you if you get red in the ledger after dropping a CMH,
It's so bad.
you just spent that was the most expensive nimblism you've ever played.
Yep.
I mean, that's literally what it boils down to. So that's I think the Briar players have to reinvent themselves. Does that mean that they have to go so far off the wall like my Goliath Gauntlet deck? Definitely not. They don't have to go that far.
I remember we were at a Pro Quest and it was in between rounds. I was playing Fi, of course, and I played I think a Rhinar and I killed him on turn 2 and I had like 45 minutes. So I went outside and I turned on the stream for the Goliath Gauntlet and I was watching you play and I saw you were like on Dread Scythe and I was like, what the hell is this man doing?
Reaping Blade, yeah.
Reaping Blade, yeah. And I think you played against Chris that game. I think that was the one I saw was you playing Chris Ioli, and I was like, what the hell's going on, man?
Yeah, it's a solid deck, but the problem is it just folds to drum line.
Sure.
But like, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of things that can be taken from that deck, kind of philosophies and ideologies that deck utilizes that the Briar players could adapt and have a better shot. Not necessarily that it's going to make it an amazing choice, but a playable choice.
Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day at PT2, right? That wasn't that long ago. Right. And Briar was everywhere. You know what I mean? Everywhere.
Absolutely.
And the meta really wasn't that different. I mean, the decks, I mean, the meta, I guess you could say was different, but the only thing that really changed in the meantime was Azalea and Azuri, who's like still, the jury's out on Azuri. But we had Oldhim, we had essentially Dromai, we had better Dromai, right? We had Prism. Icelander was a thing. What changed, do you think, with the Briar situation?
Basically, you have to have a very good reason to play the second best aggro deck.
Sure.
Or not. I don't like using the word best. The second fastest aggro deck, right? So like currently, I would say that Azalea is probably the most linear, aggressive, quickest deck.
Sure.
If you factor in all the discount, the value on the on hits and all that.
The disruption is crazy for sure.
Right. Absolutely. So I would say that she is the quote unquote fastest, but like, maybe you don't want to play that deck because you want a better game into Oldhim. That's a valid decision point, and one that would bring up a case for a deck like Briar. Do you just want to shift your matches? Do you want to like be better into this or this?
That makes sense.
But we also have to be careful of, are people going to overcorrect? Right? Do we see a situation where, all right, everybody knows that Oldhim's the best deck? Like I think,
and it has been for a long time.
Right. But now after these tournaments and kind of the data that we've gotten, like, it's pretty solidified that it's the best deck. So the question is, do too many people target? Like that's the ultimate question.
Yeah. And, if you're playing the best deck and everybody's hating on you, it's not the best deck, right?
Right. But I mean, at the same time, is there anything that's like that great into Oldhim? Like Tree Frog Dash maybe is probably the best deck into it.
Jacob Baugh made that deck, right? That was his kind of baby.
He did. And that was his top 8 in Nats.
And Nats, yeah. And that deck was specifically just to farm Oldhim, wasn't it?
That's all it was. Yep. He said I'm going to beat Icelanders because they weren't on the whole Wounded Bull situation. Sure. I mean, you could still get Frost Hex out, but we hadn't ran into the Michael Hamilton version of that deck yet because that was the tournament that it was released at. But yeah, he was just farming Guardians is all he was doing and losing to Fies, but he knew that was the risk, and it obviously paid off for him. Yeah,
100%. And then the last thing I want to talk about is a couple other decks that I kind of saw peep out a little bit and then kind of go back away. The first one is Brody at I want to say it was at the 5K. He came with Viscerai. Now, Viscerai is interesting because it is a good aggro deck. in general, it's just as fast as, if they get a Mordred turn with a Revel, it can do similar things to Briar, similar things to Fi. But it can also pivot into this really interesting control deck where you're just building up Rune Chants and blocking out. And it's kind of like a throwback to full power Viserai before Skelata got banned. Is there a world where Viserai is viable? Because I know that Brody top 8'd with it, but again, ham sandwich, you know what I mean?
Right.
Is it a Brody thing or is it a Viserai thing?
It's definitely a Brody thing because he even took that list to, if I'm not mistaken, he took that same Viserai list to the calling in New Zealand.
Okay.
And didn't day 2.
I see. Okay.
So somebody as strong as, because Brody's an amazing player.
Yeah.
Nobody can take that away from him. And then he also took it to the Battle Hardened that I was at in Charlotte.
Sure.
More recently, and he did really bad in there. I think maybe like 1-2 games, maybe 3.
Okay.
But then he switched to Oldham for the PTI event the day after and took down the whole thing.
Yeah, I think he played Michael's deck and he just destroyed. Yeah.
He's an amazing player, but just Viserai operates on a consistency issue. It's as simple as that. Does it do explosive things? Yes, but there's a lot of decks that can do equally explosive things much easier, basically.
Okay. Cool.
And the Frostbite is a huge.
It's huge
because
that curve is insane.
Right.
Viserai has a perfect curve, and if you interrupt it at all, it's just done.
Yep. Absolutely.
100%. And then the last thing I want to talk about really is Icelander. I know, man, it's like we had the best deck and it's been established since Nationals. And it's one of those things where Icelander is really difficult to pilot correctly, right? Really difficult because there's so many decision points and you have to get 99% of them right to convert that deck. And a lot of it, I think, is just patience. Like I was watching Hamilton play against... I can't remember if it might have been the Battle Hardened in Charlotte, where he came into the Fatigue Oldham in the finals or semifinals. And I remember watching you on stream and you did the crazy, what was it? It wasn't Mulch. What was the anti-fatigue tech you had going on? Rights of Replenishment. Sure. Yep. So I remember watching you do that against Oldham. And then I remember thinking like, this Oldham's going to gain a bunch of life. He's just going to block all the big attacks and probably Hamilton loses. And then I remember seeing that guy basically just tap out and drop a huge attack, and then Michael was just able to combo him out. And thinking, if that guy just swung the hammer, like he probably doesn't die, right? Does Icelander have legs into this meta? Because she did fine until the Rangers came back. And really it's just Azalea, because Lexi has been decent for a while. So what changed? Because I know that even good Icelander players I've seen can take on Katsu. They can take on Lexi, even though Lexi is supposed to be kind of a hard matchup. Do you think that that Icelander has legs and they just got to go back to the drawing board, or do you think it's kind of out for the season?
I think that she is kind of in a similar situation as Lexi, where she can be more disruptive, right? She can target the aggro deck. She can put in like more brain freeze, more what's that fuse one? Eisenhower Weathervane.
Yep, Eisenhower Weathervane.
You fuse, you make 14 million frostbites. Yep. Like she can build in that direction, sure. But when you do that, you just fold to Oldham now.
Sure.
So it's like, do you want to play the tempo game with Oldham, or do you want to be super disruptive? And if you're being super disruptive, why would you not just play Ranger?
Yeah, that makes sense.
That at least has some game into Guardian.
Sure.
So I think it's just the 2-for-8 used to be good enough, but with all the on-hit effects from outside, I mean, even Codex, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you get Codexed and you're forced to put an attack, because her typical rotation is she blocks and then she like wounded bulls you and then places a card in arsenal. Well, if you have the 3 cards in hand, your 2 blues, your wounded bull, and you get Codex, what do you do now?
Yeah.
Like it just, now you lose value because you have a frailty token, and then you're about to get hit with whatever they're about to throw.
Yeah.
So it just, frailty does hurt Icelander
a lot. Yeah, it turns her biggest hack. Go ahead.
Yeah, No, I was just gonna say that it puts what she doesn't want in Arsenal in Arsenal. She
Yeah.
doesn't want her attacks in Arsenal.
No, not at all. And she loses
Yep.
the Arsenal slot, and it makes the attack fair, right? That's the problem. It makes
Right.
the attack too fair. It becomes
Right.
two head jabs essentially, you know.
Mhm.
And then so yeah, I heard from someone that Hamilton was trying to make Katsu work. I
Mhm.
do you see a world where Katsu's a deck right now? I feel like personally I don't, but I know a lot of people that are passionate about it.
So just like Hamilton, that
Mhm.
was the first deck when Outsiders came out. That was, the first deck that I streamed on my weekly streams, and I was able to solve the fatigue Oldham problem.
Mhm.
Like I can win that 90% of the time. The problem is when they want to play the actual game of Flesh and Blood and play like the mid range game plan.
Sure.
That's very difficult for Katsu.
Mm,
Very difficult.
that makes sense, yeah. And so I guess we're heading up on an hour, so I want to cut it just so I don't keep you any
Sure.
longer. So I want to ask you two more quick questions. First question is,
Mhm.
what's the dark horse? What are we going to see pop up that nobody expects to pop up? And by
I
pop up,
think
Tree Frog.
Tree Frog.
You think
Yep.
it's going to be in the
I think
top 8? Okay. And then
100%.
based on the information that we have, who's going to win it? Not who person, but what deck do you think is going to get there?
Um, that's a tough one. I
Yeah.
think. I have to, like, statistically, it has to be an Oldham
Sure.
player,
Yeah.
right?
Of course.
The alternate answer would be whatever hero Michael Hamilton brings.
Well, that's the thing too. I was thinking about
Right.
is that long before Icelander existed, Michael Hamilton was a terrifying Oldham player. You know what I mean?
Right. Exactly.
So it's not like
Exactly.
he's picking up a new deck. He knows this deck well, and then you have Matt. God, his name escapes me, but Matt from New Zealand is going to probably play Oldham too. And I think that we have a lot of really talented Guardian players that are going to bring the decks that they know well and kind of just come, yeah. So it makes me a little bit bummed to think that Oldham's going to win it. It makes me a little bit stoked to think that maybe he LLs because of it. I haven't looked at the pro points for a while, but
That's one way to look at it.
that could be cool. I wouldn't be mad about
Yeah.
that. Everybody's been hating on our girl Briar for a long time, trying to get rid of our Thorn, but if they get rid of Oldham before they get rid of the Thorn, I'll be a happy camper.
There you go.
Yeah, I appreciate your time, man. Do you want to throw any shout outs or throw up any information, links where you can be found, what you do?
Yeah. The best way to get a hold of me is on Twitter at Nathan_TCGZ. That's where I put up, any information. I like to talk about the meta and stream schedule, stuff like that. Speaking of stream, I stream every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern on the Card Guyz channel. I do everything from YouTube channel. I do anything from gameplay to last week I did like the meta analysis, mathematical charts. I do all kinds of stuff. And then other than that, our sponsor for the Card Guyz, fabric.gg, is a great website to utilize for statistical deck building and just a great resource to find a lot of information about what a lot of people are playing.
Yep. Shout out to those guys. Tony, local guy. I'm sure you've worked with Tony.
Yep.
He's doing good work. So shout to them. So I'm Del Taco. You can find me on Discord at Del Taco, and you can find me on Twitter at Of the Taco. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk. I don't know what I'm talking about most of the time, but if you want a good chat, we can talk. So thanks again. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you in Baltimore, man.
All right. Take care.
Take care, brother.